So first off, a very, very big thank you to the Levines for hosting tonight. So thank you very much for opening your home and for putting out the amazing spread. You know, very much appreciated by everybody. So thank you very much to be able to have the opportunity to come to learn with everybody tonight, share some words, hopefully some inspiration as we go into Purim. Everybody says, it's really a Gemara. The Gemara tells us, "Misha nichnas Adar marbin b'simcha," right? So as Adar comes in, so we're supposed to increase our happiness. I guess I used to think that, what does that mean? That means by Rosh Chodesh Adar, everybody starts getting ready, right, for the holiday, right? So, and as you get ready for the holiday, you increase your happiness, right? So the women are getting all involved with what's the theme for the Mishloach Manos and everything, and that makes them happy, right? And then the kids, they're getting all involved with what they're going to wear, what are they going to dress, right? That makes them happy. And the men, they're getting it all involved, just trying to figure out how to stay out of the way, okay? And that makes everybody happy. Okay, so the more that everybody does their thing, okay, and then everybody increases happiness. That's what I used to think. However, as time went on and doing a little bit of research, Misha nichnas Adar marbin b'simcha, increasing our happiness, increasing our joy, really has a much deeper meaning. And the truth is, before we try to explain what is that happiness, what is that simcha, the first thing that we have to do is really analyze a medrash. There's a medrash that says, it's source number 1 on your sheet, that says an incredible thing. And you can never make this stuff up, but the medrash says it. It says that kol hamoadim asidim b'teilim. It says that all of the holidays in the future are going to be batal, or going to become null and void. That's referring to the times of Mashiach. After Mashiach comes, there will be no more of the regular Yomim Tovim. Done. Finished. V'yimei HaPurim einam b'teilim la'olam. However, Purim is still going to stick around. He brings a pasuk that says, "V'yimei HaPurim ha'ila lo yavru mitoch ha'Yehudim," that the days of Purim will never leave the Jews. We will always have Purim. So that means, after Mashiach comes, no more Sukkos, okay, no more Pesach. What that means about Pesach prep, all right, I'm not going to talk about it, okay, but, right, I won't say, but I'm on video. But no more Pesach, everything is finished, right, except for Purim. And it gets even stranger because the Rambam tells us that all of the Sifrei Nach that we have are all also going to be gone. Not going to be gone, but more that we're not going to read them anymore. We're not going to read any of the Sifrei Nach anymore except for Megillas Esther. That we're still going to read. So we're still going to read Megillas Esther. We're still going to have the holiday of Purim. Why? Like when you think about Pesach, you think about the Nisim, you think about all that took place, right? All of the tremendous miracles, the splitting of the sea, the Makos, everything. So, that was a pretty big miracle. The Ramban tells us, we know that Pesach is like the cornerstone of our faith. Yetzias Mitzrayim is everything. We always talk about it. Zecher, to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. But yet Hashem says that that's going to be gone. We're not going to have that anymore. But Purim, this one-day holiday where we're allowed to do malacha, and it's this nice day where we all dress up, etc., that day is going to still stick around. Why? Why is that? And I saw an absolutely beautiful answer from Rav Hutner. Rav Yitzchak Hutner Zatzal said as follows. He gave a mashal. He said, could you imagine if there were 2 security guards outside and they're on watch? They're watching a building, and they're making sure that nobody comes in, no thieves are coming, etc., to cause harm to the building. And they're there the entire night. 2 different stations. However, one of the guards has a flashlight, and the other guard does not. So he poses the following question. He says, who has the advantage? Any thoughts? That's who has the advantage? Flashlight or no flashlight? So I think we would all assume, right, as I did as well, when you assume the guy with the flashlight obviously has the advantage. In the dark, it's nighttime, can't see too well, but you shine the flashlight at anybody that's approaching, and then you can see them very clearly. But Rav Hutner says, while that's true on one level, he says the other guy really has a much bigger advantage. Because the other guy, as he is there throughout the entire night, he's also on watch, and he's also trying to do his job. So how does he recognize people? He hears them coming. And as he hears the people coming, even though he can't really see them too well, but he tries to put his ear to the sound, and he really tries to utilize his abilities to hear to pick up and figure out who this individual is. Is this somebody who's dangerous? Is this somebody who's safe? Is this a person who I recognize? And as more and more people are walking by, that guard keeps on doing that, and he's training his ear to become more sensitive to recognize the people that are coming. When dawn breaks, and now it's the morning time and the sun comes out, the guy with the flashlight has no more advantage. It's light outside. He could see the people coming. However, the other guy, the guy who did not have the flashlight, who spent the whole night training his ear to pick up, to be sensitive to picking up the sounds that were coming, he now has an additional advantage. Now, not only could he see perfectly, but he could also hear and pick up the sounds from a distance. And he developed that added koach, that added strength to recognize people. Says Rav Hutner, that's exactly what Purim is all about. He says, you see, when it comes to the other Yomim Tovim, when it comes to Pesach, it comes to Sukkot, so we recognize these incredible nisim, these incredible miracles that took place. However, in the times of Mashiach, we're going to see even greater miracles. And those miracles are going to outshadow the miracles of the Makos and the miracles of the splitting of the sea. And therefore, we're not going to need those anymore. However, Purim is a whole different type of miracle. Everything that happened in the Purim story happened undercover. It happened behind the scenes. Every miracle that took place wasn't, it wasn't this big open miracle that happened. It was all behind the scenes. It was Hashem guiding the way in the background. And when you look and you analyze Purim and you study the holiday, what you pick up is, Hashem is really there in the background and running the show. And the more that a person studies Megillas Esther, and the more that a person celebrates Purim and recognizes that ability that you're going to pick up, that I could see and recognize Hashem involved in my life, the same way Hashem was involved in the Purim story in the background. Not through big open miracles, but through the day-to-day activity. That is something, that is an added koach, an added strength that we're going to take with us, and we're going to need after the times of Mashiach. And I heard an amazing story about a year ago where there was a guy, could be you've heard this story, but there was a guy in Israel, and he's davening at the kosel. Okay, and he's like in the background a little bit. And after he finishes davening, he looks at the kosel, and he sees that he looks and he sees like all the different types of people that are davening there. And he especially notices one individual who is davening very intently. But something strikes him as being very interesting. He looks at this guy, what is it? This guy was wearing a full New York Rangers getup. Okay? And he was davening very, very intensely at the kosel, but he's wearing full New York Rangers gear. And the person who was watching said, this seems so interesting. He was watching this guy. And after he finishes davening, he takes that piece of paper, right, that he wrote his special tefillah on, and he sticks it in the wall. He begins to walk away. Now this onlooker is watching this, and as he sees him walking away, what happens with the paper? It falls out of the wall. Okay, and now it's on the ground, and he's looking at it, and he says, I really want to pick up that piece of paper. And he's saying, I got to see what this guy was praying for, the New York Rangers. It looked so interesting. I got to find it. He said, come on, you can't do that. That's so wrong. Okay, that is so illegal, right? Hashem does not want that. And he's going back and forth. No, I can't do it. No, I got to do it. I can't do it, but I really want to look. Well, in the end of the day, the Yetzer Hara wins. And he runs over to the piece of paper, and he opens it up. And he has this guilty feeling in the back of his mind, but he starts to read the piece of paper, and this is what it says. It says, Dear God, I have no idea why, but the Wi-Fi in my hotel is not working. And for some reason, I ran out of data. And I have no idea what the score was in the Rangers game last night. Could you please help me find out the score in the game? That was the tefillah. So this guy, he says, oh man, I am going to pull a fast one. I am going to pull a fast one on this guy. He quickly pulls out his phone. He goes to ESPN.com. He looks up all the highlights of the game last night, and he gets the score. He gets the play-by-play, and he runs over to this fellow, and he says he's going to tell him the score. He's going to pull a fast one. He goes over to him, and he says, I couldn't help but notice that you're a Rangers fan. I just want to tell you that I'm also a Rangers fan. He says, really? Kidding, I'm so happy I'm meeting you. Can you please tell me, do you have any idea what happened in the game last night? He says, of course I know what happened in the game. And he starts to spit it all out, everything that happened, the whole play-by-play, tells him the score of the game. The fellow is so happy. And they part ways, and the guy's walking away on cloud 9. Wow, everything worked out. I got my score. And this fellow continues on his way, and he's feeling like really, really guilty. That was so wrong. I shouldn't have looked at the piece of paper. I shouldn't have done that. The ESPN and going and just giving him the score. I feel so bad. So he goes to talk to his rabbi about it, and he tells him what he did, and he's like confessing. He's like popping off. He feels so bad, and he says, I feel bad. I pulled a fast one on the guy, and the rabbi looks at him. He says, listen. He says, I have to tell you, first of all, you did do the wrong thing, okay? You shouldn't have looked at that piece of paper. That was wrong. However, I just want to point out that I see a flaw in your perspective. You see, you're viewing it as if because you read the piece of paper, so you decided in your mind you're going to pull a shtick on this guy, it's going to be really funny and pull this joke. He goes, no. That's not what happened. The rabbi said that this fellow davened a sincere tefillah to Hashem. This fellow really davened to Hashem to find out the score in the game. And you know what? He was answered. He was answered through you. Hashem orchestrated it for you to find out this information, for you to go give him that score, and he got his score in the game. Did you do the wrong thing? Yes. However, Hashem worked it out for him to end up getting the score in the game. And that's exactly what the Purim story is supposed to be teaching us. That's what the whole Yontif is about, to recognize that everything that takes place in our lives is being done for a purpose. Everything that happens is being orchestrated by the Rabbonu Shel Olam, and it's all happening for a particular purpose. This guy davened sincerely to Hashem, and Hashem was answering him. But oftentimes we just think that it's coincidence. We think it's us making it happen, but that's not really the case. And if you take when you take a deeper look at the Purim story, you see all this stuff happening. The story itself happened over a span of 9 years. That's a very long time. All those events from Achashverosh's party up until the way end was 9 years long. And at the beginning, when Queen Vashti is killed, so we know that Achashverosh decides to make this big beauty pageant, okay, and he's going to find a new wife, okay. However, what many people don't realize is that Esther, when she found out about that, she decided to go in hiding. She was actually hiding out for 4 years to not get caught, to be taken to this pageant. Eventually, she was caught, and she was brought in. However, what happened was all of the ladies who were brought before Achashverosh actually had a 12-month preparation before they went in. There was 6 months of a special oil treatment that they got, and then 6 months of a special cosmetic treatment that they got. And then, only after that, did they go into Achashverosh. Now Esther, after she got caught, she got taken in, she said, I don't want any of these treatments. Nothing. Just take me in. Just take me in as is. And we know what happens. Out of all those ladies, Achashverosh ends up selecting Esther. Now we know that Esther was quite beautiful, but that's a very, very big deal. She gets selected later on in the story. Later on in the story, when Mordechai tells her, he says, I want you to go into Achashverosh and tell him that you got to let the Jewish people, you got to save the Jewish people. She says, I can't just go in. You can't just go in there. I haven't been summoned by the king in 30 days. If you go into the king and you're not summoned, that's punishable by death. Mordechai told her, but you got to go. So she said as follows. She said, you know what? Let the Jews pray. Let the Jews daven. And then I'm going to go in. And if I die, I die. Now, oftentimes, as a kid, we hear that story, say, okay, whatever, that's just the way, she was scared, whatever. No, she was scared, but that was a very, very big fear at that time. That was a real law. You could not go into the king unless you were summoned. And if you did, then you were punishable by death. The kings really did kill people, as we saw from Vashti. And she was really, really afraid. Legitimately. However, ultimately she was saved. At the end of the story, later on in the story, Haman all of a sudden decides, he says, I've had it with Mordechai. that's it. I'm done with him. So he says, I'm going to hang up these gallows, and I'm going to get approval from Achashverosh, and I'm going to kill him tomorrow morning. The gallows are set to go, and he decides to do something crazy. It was the middle of the night. He decides to go to Achashverosh then, while Achashverosh is sleeping, and knock on his door, which was also unheard of, to get approval from Achashverosh to kill Mordechai the following morning. Well, it just so happens that Haman came on the night that Achashverosh couldn't sleep. And Achashverosh, not only did it just happen that he couldn't sleep, but he also asked to read from the Book of Chronicles. And it also just so happened that Book of Chronicles was open to the story about Mordechai saving his life. And it also just so happened that right after that, the King Achashverosh said, I need to speak to one of my top advisors to find out what to do for somebody who did such a great thing for the king. And right then is when there was a knock on the door, and that was Haman. Came to ask Achashverosh to kill Mordechai, and Achashverosh says, perfect, I was looking for you. I just wanted to know, what should I do for somebody who I owe so much honor and dignity to? And we know what Haman said, of course, thinking about himself. He said, ride him on your horse with all your garb, etc. And Achashverosh says, do that for Mordechai. All of that just so happened. And after the whole event where Haman marches Mordechai around the streets in the king's garb, if you look at source number 2, what does Haman say? Haman says something incredible. Haman goes back home, and it says, Vayasaper Haman leZeresh ishto uchol oavav. Haman goes back to Zeresh, his wife, and to all his friends. And he says, Is kol asher karahu. All that happened. He tells them all that happened, all of these events that took place. Vayomru lo chachama v'zeresh ishto, and the wise people and Zeresh, his wife, say that imizera haYehudim Mordechai sher chilosa linpol lefanav lo tucha lo kinafol tipol lefanav. They say back that, listen, if this Mordechai guy, if he's Jewish, okay, just realize that you're in big trouble because something is going on over here. The Malbim says something incredible. He says that word earlier where Haman said, Es kol asher karahu. The Megillah says that Haman told his wife and his friends all that happened. The Malbim tells us it doesn't just mean he told them the events, but it means that he told them that all of this that happened, it just happened. All that just took place was mere coincidence. It wasn't guided. This wasn't set up by anybody. This was mere coincidence. That's all it was. However, Zeresh, his wife, who was also a big Rasha, and all of Haman's friends, who were also big Rishayim, nonetheless, they recognized and they realized that this was not mere coincidence. This clearly was guided. There's clearly a God in charge of the world. And if you continue to mess with him, with Mordechai, you're going to be in big trouble and you're going to fall. But Haman didn't realize it. Haman said, this all just happened. It all just took place. I heard a story. I actually saw it written up on Aish.com. There's a Rabbi Benjamin Blech says over the following story that he was, years back when he had started in the rabbinate. So he came to his new shul. Okay? And it was literally one of the first days on the job. Somebody came over to him and said, Rabbi, there's an older lady in the community who is not part of our shul. However, she really wants to speak to a rabbi. Would you have time to be able to talk to her? And he said, absolutely, of course. I would love to be able to speak to her, help her, whatever she needs. And he said he made up in his mind that he's going to go. However, something happened that day, and he couldn't go. And then the next day, things got busy, and this new job in the rabbinate, etc., it was just taking a toll. He's getting calls left and right, etc. And a week went by, and 2 weeks went by, and he still hasn't gone to go visit her. And he was feeling really, really guilty about it. He said, I was asked to go. It was 2 weeks ago already. But, all right, he says, one night, he tells his wife, that's it. It's been on my mind. I gotta go. She says, it's freezing cold outside. It's late right now. What do you mean? He says, no, there's something that's bothering me. I really need to go speak to her. I must go talk to this lady to help her out. And he decides right then and there, I'm going out, even though it's freezing cold, but I'm gonna go. And he goes to the house, and as he's about to knock on the door to this house, the door opens up, like flies open, and this young teenager, I guess you could say, from his perspective, comes like flying out of the door. And he sees the rabbi, he's like right there, and he stops. He looks at the rabbi, and he's like, yeah, can I help you? And the rabbi said, sorry. He said, I was here to see Mrs. Cohen. Is this Mrs. Cohen's house? And he says, yeah, of course. He says, come on in. And the fellow is like trembling. This young man, he's like trembling. The rabbi is noticing, like, what's going on? And maybe he's just very cold because he opened up the door. But why is he trembling? Why is he shaking? He has no idea. And when it looked like the young man, was about to be running out of the house, it turned out he just like turned around and he sat down in the living room. And he stuck around. The rabbi thought that was interesting, but okay, so he goes over to Mrs. Cohen, introduces himself, and he begins to talk to her. And they're making small talk, and clearly Mrs. Cohen is like looking at the corner of her eye at her son, who was that young man, and kind of like waiting for him to leave. She thought he was leaving. But he's not leaving, and she keeps on trying to like make small talk, and it seems like a little bit uncomfortable. And after a certain point, she says, you know what, Rabbi? I was going to wait for my son to leave to tell you what I'm about to tell you, but my son is here, and I'm just going to share this information with you now. You see, my son has been dating this young lady who's not Jewish. And I feel that my son is on the verge of marrying her. And I'm so upset. And I wanted to know what I could do. Is there anything that I could do? I am so upset about this. It's been our family heritage for years, and this is our only son, and that's it. And Judaism is going to be lost from our family. What could I do? And at that moment, when the son hears this, he begins to cry. And he turns to the mother, and he turns to the rabbi, and he says, you know, I was actually about to marry my girlfriend. In fact, my girlfriend is a devout Catholic, and she would only marry me if I would convert to Christianity. And I was going back and forth about it for a while, and I knew that it would be damaging and painful to my family if I would do that. But after a long decision, I decided this is the girl that I love, and I'm going to go ahead with it. And tonight was the night that we had a meeting scheduled with the priest, and we were going to go talk to him to set up the conversion process. And that's actually where I was headed as I was opening the door. And then right then and there, I was stopped by a rabbi. And he said, I started to tremble. What does this mean? Is this some kind of a sign from God? And I've been thinking it over the last number of minutes here. And I really think that God is telling me something. Because I knew that as I was about to leave that door, as I was walking out to go to that meeting, I knew that not only was I leaving my house, but I was leaving my heritage forever. And I was ready to make that step. I was ready to say no more Judaism in my family. That's it. I was going to do that for this girl that I love. However, when I was blocked, when all of a sudden there was a rabbi right there in my face, a rabbi which is a sight that I haven't seen since my bar mitzvah, I decided this must be some kind of a sign from God, and I'm not going to go ahead with the conversion. And Rabbi Blech was saying that when you think about this story really tells us what Purim is all about. You know, nothing happens by coincidence. Nothing happens by coincidence. You know, it just so happened that he decided to go at that particular night, and it just so happened that this guy took his presence as a sign to not go ahead with his plans. Clearly that was orchestrated by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But this is something that a person really has to recognize. And, you know, the reality is that, like, unfortunately, we don't always see it that clearly. Unfortunately, on our day-to-day, in our day-to-day lives, it's not this like massive hashgacha prata story that we could print up in a book. Oftentimes, if a person misses their flight, they oversleep, they miss their flight, so their friend asks them, oh, you missed your flight. Like, oh, what happened? Something major must have happened to you because you missed your flight. Most of the time, the answer is, no, nothing happened, right? Nothing major happened. I really just missed my flight. And I ended up getting my schedule all messed up, and I ended up missing the meeting that I was supposed to have, and it ended up costing me this and this relationship, etc., etc. That's usually what happens. So it's not so easy to recognize that Hashem is involved. However, part of our avoda is really to see and to recognize that Hashem is really the one who's guiding everything that happens. I saw quoted in Rabbi Yachnes's sefer over here. Rabbi Yachnes wrote a beautiful, beautiful translation of the Orcha Tzadikim a number of years ago. This is one volume. I believe that there's at least 3, but maybe there's 5. I'm not sure. I don't know if you know, but this is absolutely beautiful. It's translated into English, and it was published by Feldheim, and he added in his own commentaries at the bottom. Okay, I'm not making a pitch because I get a cut. I don't get any commissions. Okay, from any Orcha Tzadikim sold in Hollywood. Okay, but it's absolutely beautiful. And he says over there a phenomenal thing. If you take the word mikra in Hebrew, which means happening. Okay, like we said before, that Haman said, that the Megillah says, as kol asher karahu. The word mikra means happening. He says if you change around the letters, it ends up spelling rak me Hashem. To mean that nothing happens. Nothing just happens. Everything is rak me Hashem. Everything is only from Hashem. Everything is clearly guided by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And everybody's probably wondering now, so okay, wonderful. But what does this have to do with Simcha? Okay, we said in the title that the shir is going to be about Simcha. We said Misha Nichnas Adar Marbin b'Simcha, right? That Adar comes and we increase our happiness. But what does this have to do with Simcha? Very nice. Hashkacha pratis. A person has to recognize Hashem is involved. But how does that lead to Simcha? And the Orcha Tzadikim tells us something fantastic. And it's number 3 on your sheet if you want to follow along. I'll read it in English for the sake of time. He says, in the Gate of Happiness, in his chapter where he's discussing happiness, he says, let us return to the topic of happiness. He says, he who believes with a complete heart and trusts in the help of God will always be happy. Will always be happy. And bear everything. Just as a sick person eats bitter medicines in order to be healed, he who bears problems willingly is free from the worry of the world. A person who has trust in Hashem, a person who trusts that Hashem is clearly guiding everything that's happening in his or her life, will ultimately have happiness. That is a guarantee. Now, I'll tell you what he's not saying. What he's not saying is, he's not saying that it's like, if you trust in God, then that's a special mitzvah, and as a result, Hashem sends you, as a blessing, Hashem sends you happiness. That's not what he's saying. It's not a segula, like, oh, I have bitachon, and then there's a segula, Hashem sends me happiness. That's not at all what he's saying. What he's saying is as follows. He's saying that if a person recognizes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running their entire world, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who loves me, Hashem who cares about me, Hashem who only does good for me, is controlling and running and orchestrating every single thing that's happening in my life, then I'm going to be happy because I have nothing to worry about. The Chovos HaLevavos that was written by Rabbeinu Bachya, he says as follows, has the same idea. He says that, why bitachon, trust in Hashem, leads to happiness? He says because it's like a child, a little baby that is being bathed, being clothed by their mother. The child is screaming bloody murder. The kid hates it. The kid hates being bathed, hates being clothed. They feel uncomfortable, etc. It's not a positive experience. However, we know that if you're in the hands of the mother, then you're safe. If you're in the hands of your mother is doing what's best for you. Your mother loves you and your mother cares about you. And the more that a person feels that, the more bitachon, the more simcha that they're going to really feel. There's an amazing story that happened to a friend of mine. Him and his wife, it was a few years ago, they gave birth to a child that had a lot of issues, that had a lot of problems, a lot of physical problems. And they went from doctor to doctor, okay, and they kept on being sent from one place to the next until ultimately they were sent to a surgeon, okay, who would be able to do the one procedure that needed to be done on this child. And this was actually the only surgeon in the world that was trained and confident to be able to pull off this procedure. The procedure was scheduled to be 16 hours long. Straight. One surgeon, 16 hours. And after all said and done, they're there and they're in the surgery and they're in the waiting room. And they're waiting there with other parents whose children are also in surgery at the time. And there were a lot of different surgeries going on, most of them being routine surgeries. Tonsils out, appendicitis, etc. Now we know that every single surgery has its complications and is dangerous. However, those surgeries are more routine, more typical than others, than this particular one. And it was sometime in the middle of the surgery where a nurse came over to my friend and to his wife and said, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you a question. She said, I couldn't help but notice that, when I look around the room and I look at all of the other parents in the room, who most of them are here because their kids are getting their tonsils out, their kids are getting appendicitis, etc. So, it's dangerous, but it's routine stuff. All of these parents, they're so petrified. There's so much anxiety going on in the room from all of these people, so much fear, so much worry. And yet, when I look at you, where your child is having this extremely sensitive and dangerous surgery, I see these faces that are extremely calm, and I see that all that anxiety doesn't exist. And the nurse said, how is that possible? And she responded to the nurse as follows. She said, I have to explain to you that, we believe in God. And we believe that God runs the world, and we believe that God is always doing what's best for us. She said that belief leads us to understand that there's nothing to worry about. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. God is in full control, and God is doing what is best for me. All that I have to do is to try to do our best to get to the right place and to do the right thing. And we did that. We went to all the doctors. We went to, all the top people that we can. And this is where we are. We have no reason to worry. And Rabbi Yaakov actually writes this, and I'm going to read from his book for a moment. He writes, based on a conversation that he had with Rabbi Shaya Cohn. Rabbi Shaya Cohn is a well-known educator in New York, and he's, I guess one can say, he's really a master in the topic of bitachon. And Rabbi Yaakov said, from speaking to him and from studying Rabbeinu Bachaya on the topic, he says as follows. He says, you want to know where anxiety comes from? You want to know where stress comes from? Worry? It comes from one thing. It comes from the fact that we view results of our actions being in our hands. We view the fact that when we do something, when we do whatever it may be, that the outcome, the result, is in our power. That we could control that result. And he said that is where all anxiety and all worry and all stress comes from. However, if we would really understand the truth, and if we would really focus and understand it and develop it in our brain that that's not true, results are not up to us. We don't accomplish anything. Our job is just to do what he says is the what and the how. We just have to figure out what to do and how to do it. But the results of our actions are not up to us. They're totally in the hands of Hashem. And when a person truly feels that, and he truly feels that, results are not up to me. I don't accomplish anything. It's not, I'm not the one who's calling the shots. I'm not the one who's making anything happen. So then, really, they're going to feel happy. One would think, though, that's the ultimate, that's the ultimate stress causer, right? If you think about it, if results are not in my hands, then that should cause worry. But the truth is, no, it's the other way around. Because when we understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our father, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our mother, and Hashem is the one who is ultimately doing what's best for us, so then we could have that same feeling as that couple. We could feel the same thing as them. There's no reason for us to worry. There's no reason for me to be petrified because Hashem is taking full care of me. I saw So I saw an incredible story not too long ago where there was an individual who was driving. He was driving from Brooklyn, New York to Lakewood, New Jersey. And he was driving down the Garden State Parkway. And some people who were watching noticed that a crazy thing happened. All of a sudden his car veered off of the highway, and his car ends up falling off of the highway, and the car dropped approximately 100 feet. 100 feet off of the highway. It was elevated at that time, dropped approximately 100 feet. Car drops down, and the car was completely smashed. It looked like an accordion, completely smashed inside out. And the cops came. However, they actually they didn't go over to the car right away, because they just assumed that there was no way that anybody could possibly be alive in the car. Until one of the witnesses who was there walks over to the car and opens up and sees this person kind of moving in there and says, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And at that point, this individual looks and says, "I don't know." And that was it. And then this individual found himself in the hospital. And that fellow was actually a well-known speaker, Rabbi David Ben Susan, who almost lost his life in that car accident. And he said that he completely blacked out. He had no idea what happened. But he was in the hospital, and he was totally fine. And after all kinds of tests that they did, etc., all that they found was that he had a sprained finger. After all the tests, everything was okay. However, the story doesn't end there. He was in the hospital for a day or two, just checking everything out and making sure that things were okay. And there was somebody in the room right next to him, a lady right next door, who clearly had broken her foot, and he overheard the doctors coming in and saying that we're not sure, after 2 surgeries were done already, we're not sure if she's going to be able to walk again. He said, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" And he asked the lady's husband who was there, says, "What happened? And was she in a major accident? What took place?" And the husband told her, he said, "No." He said there was one morning, where she woke up, she stepped out of her bed the wrong way, and her foot just happened to crack, and now we have all these complications. Rabbi Ben Susan said, "I fell 100 feet, and all I walked away with was a sprained finger." This woman dropped 2 feet, and now she might not be able to walk for the rest of her life. There's no greater expression, the fact that Hashem is clearly controlling the world. And everything that is happening because Hashem wills it to happen, because that is ultimately what Hashem wants. And it's our job to really recognize that and take that in. The more that we think about that, the more simcha that brings. I'm going to end with one last point. The Torah, the Megillah tells us, if you look at number 4 on your sheet, the Megillah tells us that, it's a quote from Masechta Shabbos quoting the Megillah. It says as follows. It says that Rava tells us that the Jews, I'll read it in English, "Even so, they again accepted it willingly in the times of Achashverosh, as it is written, the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed what they had already accepted." The famous words, Kimu v'kiblu ha-Yehudim, at the end of the Megillah, the Jews re-accepted the Torah. And the Gemara tells us that this was a greater acceptance of the Torah than at the time of Har Sinai. From Har Sinai until now, the Jews had always, one can say, been coerced into accepting the Torah. We know that Hashem lifted up a mountain over us, and there was a certain aspect of force in accepting the Torah at Har Sinai. However, after the Purim story, for some reason, was the first time in the history of the Jewish people that we accepted the Torah totally out of love for Hashem. Totally because we just want to. We just wanted to. No fear involved. We just love Hashem. And why did that happen? Rashi explains to us as follows. Because the Jewish people recognized all the nisim that took place. They looked at the story. They looked at what happened. They looked at the last 9 years and they said, wow, this was clearly orchestrated by Hashem. Hashem is clearly in charge. Hashem clearly loves me. And it was that ahava, that love that they felt from Hashem that caused them to say, you know what? If Hashem feels such love for me, then what I need to do is to connect with Hashem. If Hashem is so close with me, and Hashem cares about me like a parent does to a child, then the obvious next step after that is I just want to develop a closer and deeper relationship with Hashem. And that's why they said kimu v'kiblu, that's why they reaccepted the Torah, and it was totally out of love. Because they now understood what it means to have the Torah. The Torah, the mitzvos, these are not, not mere acts that we do. Just, it's a mitzvah, no. These are actions that we do to develop a closer relationship with Hashem because we feel close with Hashem. Because Hashem loves us. And I'm going to conclude with the following story. I heard a few years back there was a certain rabbi who was working in Kiruv, and one of the things that he was doing was he was giving a class. He would give a class to people who were potentially looking to convert to Judaism. Okay? And there was like a group of people, they would come and they would go through the whole grilling process, and he would sit them down and he would say, come on, you don't really want to do this. You don't really want to do this. 613, it's too much, it's too much in your face, you don't want it. And they would say, no, we want it, whole back and forth. And they would come to the class. And after all that process, he ended up with 50 students signed up for this Gerus class to become converts. And after about a month of like intense, rigorous study, they start dropping like flies. Okay, and about 10 are out. Then 2 months later, there's another 20 out. Okay, it was about 6 months later that it was down to one person in the class. Okay, and there was this one lady there. And he looks at her and he says, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you a question. It's like, why are you still here? Your 49 friends, they all dropped out of the course, okay? They couldn't handle it. They said it's too much. They realized that taking on this Jewish stuff, it's just not for them, okay? There's really no sense in it for them. Life is good the way that they have it. So, why are you here? What are you doing, right? This study, it's so intense, it's so much. You have to know so much, you have to do so much. Why? Why would you want that? And she looks up at him and she says, I'll tell you why. She says, because most of my friends are Jewish. But what I'm seeing is that most of my friends are all marrying out of the faith. And you know what that means to me? You know what I view myself as? I view myself as a poor person who's like sitting in the background watching a whole bunch of wealthy people sit by a fire and take $100 bills out and just throw it in the fire. That's what I feel like. Looking at my friends constantly intermarrying, not devoted to their faith. They're taking $100 bills. They're taking something that's so precious, something that's so incredible, and they're just throwing it away into a fire. And she said that when I see that, it causes me to realize what it is that you people have. The fact that you have the ability, the fact that you have the opportunity to come so close to God, to develop such a close relationship with Hashem, that's something that I really, really want. And as a result, she ended up going through the conversion process. So, ultimately, we have to remember that Purim is all about recognizing that Hashem is behind the scenes. That's why Purim is going to stick around after the Yemos HaMashiach, and none of the other holidays will, because Purim causes us to remember, just like that security guard, to realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really running the show. And the more that a person recognizes that Hashem is really the one in charge of my life and running the show, the more bitachon, the more trust we'll have in Hashem, the less anxieties, the less stress, all of that will go away, and we'll ultimately be able to live a life of simcha. And it's a message that we can teach, but more importantly, show our children as well. If we show our children that Hashem is involved in your life on a day-to-day basis, Hashem is orchestrating this, and Hashem orchestrated that for you, etc., etc. So then, ultimately, they will have that same feeling, that same sense of being safe, that same feeling of confidence, and ultimately, the feeling of